So I just finished the game. I'm using random pieces of gear, just the highest ones that I had available. But I'm still able to breeze through endgame content because there are some skills that are just way too overpowered, as well as combos with other skills, which make the game a lot easier. I'm playing at Give Me No Mercy, so if you're playing on an even lower difficulty, you definitely know these strats will work. What's up everyone, I'm Gushy, and in this video, we'll be going over these skills and skill combos which you should be using to get that mod slot. If you didn't know, each skill has a skill labor task, which just means you have to use it in combat to increase its tier from bronze, silver to gold. Once you get to gold, you can buy a mod token, which will basically buff that skill even more. So without further ado, let's get into it. Starting off the axe, as you can see it in the gameplay in the background, this is a CC or crowd control playstyle, which is super fun. Here I use a combination of Leviathan's Fury. While sprinting, press R2 to perform a massive leaping attack applying frost. Not only does it apply a ton of frost, but it also staggers enemies. This is usually just an opener to stagger enemies, so you can go into Serpent Snare. Hold R2 for a brutal axe attack that throws enemies to apply massive damage. The animation charge up time is pretty slow, but after you use Leviathan's Fury, it should give you enough time to charge up safely for Serpent Snare. You really want to target weaker enemies because weaker enemies are thrown, creating an explosion of frost, which creates this chain effect where you could continuously throw weak enemies. Another good thing about Serpent Snare is that there are two different stuns, one on the initial impact of your axe hit. So as you can see in the background, even though enemies are charging me, once I get that initial hit off, they stun for a little bit so I can throw the enemy and do the second stun when it impacts on the ground. Now the glaring weakness, of course, is that this only works on weaker foes, so this is mostly used for trash mobs, but good thing we have other skills we can use as well. Alright, this next combo is good against mobs and stronger enemies such as bosses, and this is the combination of Frozen Breach. Press R1 during Frost Awaken to do a wide swing and apply frost to nearby enemies. The frost isn't that important, but the more important thing is that it stuns enemies. Almost all enemies except large animals and the travelers get stunned by this, so it's really good for keeping enemies pinned down. Now the only problem is that you have to Frost Awaken your axe, and the way that we can do that is simply by throwing your axe and then using Frost Awaken 3, hold triangle while recalling the axe to quickly activate Frost Awaken. This quick awaken is so useful because we're throwing the axe at a decently far distance. It's a really safe option to both do damage and get that buff for Frozen Breach. This definitely doesn't take enemies down that fast, but this is your safest option if you're in a pinch. Of course, in this example is just against mobs, just cycling through these skills, but keep in mind you could also do your normal light attacks as well as runic attacks to stun enemies. Usually for boss fights, right after an enemy attacks, you have enough time for 3 light attacks before the enemy starts attacking again. So if you start off with Frozen Breach to initially stun an enemy, get 3 light attacks, go into your light runic attack, go back to another 3 light attacks, and then do a heavy runic attack, you basically have 9 free light attacks to keep the enemy stunned. And Frozen Breach is that opener to get those initial 3 light attacks while you wait for your cooldowns. Alright, this next skill is called Glacial Rake, and this really excels in applying frost really quickly. Of course, we'll have the frost element mod on it, but I also wanted to mention 2 other skills as well, because I think it pairs perfectly with this. This is Whirling Storm. While evading, hold left stick forward and press R1 to perform a quick spinning double slash. And Evasive Storm, while evading, hold left stick back and then press R1 for a quick boomerang throw. Now the reason why I say these work perfectly together is that instead of just holding R1 to continually do Glacial Rake, which looks like this, you really don't want to just stand still, and inevitably you're gonna have to dodge at some time. What's really great is you can animation cancel Glacial Rake with a dodge. So once you hear the axe hit the ground, hit the dodge button and you can dodge any direction you want, basically keeping you a little bit mobile as you spam this skill. If you practice this, you'll kind of get into a rhythm, but once you're practicing, you might notice that if you press dodge too late, you'll actually go into Whirling Storm. Again, if you're holding left stick forward, or if you're holding the left stick back, you go into Evasive Storm for that quick boomerang throw. Now this is super important because it gives you the freedom to play more aggressively or defensively. Glacial Rake doesn't do that much damage, it just applies frost. But Whirlwind Storm actually does a lot of damage, so if you want to go more aggressive, you can follow up Glacial Rake with a quick whirlwind storm, or if you need some more space from the enemies, you can hit back on the left stick and get more distance with evasive storm while also doing damage. Now as you can see in the gameplay, the one downside is that there's not much stun on these moves, so you will have to either block or parry to stay safe sometimes. But overall, this is pretty fun to quickly slow down enemies. Now to take this skill even further and do even more damage, we can utilize the skills Vaporize Frost and Extinguish Flame. The blade skills Vaporize Frost says blade melee attacks against frozen enemies deal bonus damage. And since we're applying Frost really quickly to a lot of enemies at once, ideally you can switch to the Blades of Chaos to get a buff to our melee damage. Vice versa, if we burn enemies with our blades, we could take use of Extinguish Flames to buff our axe damage. There's two ways you can apply burn with your blades. One is through Scorched Earth. This does a burn explosion and blazing explosion. If you upgrade to Blazing Explosion 1, you get an explosion dealing massive burn damage. If you hold down R2, the animation is kind of long, so you really have to make sure that you're in a safe distance. Now Scorched Earth by itself isn't that good, but there's a way to get crazy damage out of this. So if you get all the skills down this tree, you can get Flame Whiplash 2, which instantly charges Flame Whiplash if you press triangle momentarily after any Blade of Chaos attack. The timing is pretty precise. If you look at Kratos' right hand, once it bounces a second time, then press triangle, and then you should be able to activate Flame Whiplash 2. And so with a fully charged Flame Whiplash, Scorched Earth now does crazy damage. The only thing that I found problematic is that you can't be moving to activate this instant recharge, so you're kind of a sitting duck. So I don't think it's ideal to just spam this move, but definitely weave it into your other moves if you're trying to get a little bit more burst damage. Now this next skill I think is one of the most overpowered skills in the game, and this is Hyperion Grapple. Aim with L2 and hold R1 to launch forward. This does a high amount of stun, and you could also include a mod that increases the stun even further. On top of that, it stuns enemies behind your initial target and applies burn to them. So if you look at the enemy behind the enemy I'm attacking, after 3 grapples, my initial target can be grabbed and the enemy behind them is burned. So this is actually another great option for burn if you're going back and forth between the Leviathan Axe and the Blades of Chaos. Keep in mind that if you knock enemies against a wall, it does even more stun damage. So as you're stunning enemies, definitely try to back them against the wall so you can stun grab them even faster. Not just like the Leviathan Axe. The blades actually have some skill that provide a lot of CC to mobs as well. The skill Rising Chaos launches multiple enemies up in the air, along with Chaos Slam, which is the sprinting R2. It's just crazy good for low level mobs. If you're surrounded, just throw these moves out and you should be good. Finally, moving on to the spear. And as we're talking about CC, I think the spear has the craziest CC ability, and this is called Gale Force. You want to upgrade this all to Gale Force 3 and get the stun mod. Hold L2 to aim and then hold down R2. Once it charges, you let go and it'll blast enemies pretty far away. Now this skill actually has a ton of stun, and very similar to the Leviathan Axe's Frozen Breach skill, this pretty much stuns all enemies except large animals and travelers. This definitely does less damage, but it does push enemies back a lot farther, making it the perfect skill to ring out enemies and instantly kill them. Unfortunately, this map does not have somewhere you can knock people off the edge, but because you can basically chain stun enemies and push them against the wall, it does a ton of stun damage, and the area of effect is pretty large, allowing you to push back a ton of enemies at once. This skill might be even better than the Blades of Chaos Hyperion Grapple, but again, this is more for stun damage. If you're trying to go for more damage, the skill Spear Drill does a decent amount of damage, but also keeps enemies pinned down. This means that while this skill is active, you can also do your light attacks to do even more damage at the same time. Keep in mind this also impales enemies with spears, so you can detonate them and stun them even further for a little bit more damage. Alright, with that, that's all the skills that I found really useful, and hopefully you guys find helpful as well. If you did, please drop a like, and definitely check out all our other God of War Ragnarok videos. Check out our channel, we have a playlist with builds and other tips and tricks just like this. As always, thank you guys for watching, hope to catch you in the next one, and GG.